Okay, well, Stacey, it's a huge pleasure to have you join us on the Sales Transformation podcast series. And I just wonder whether for the listeners, you could just spend a bit of time introducing yourself to us, a little bit about your career, and then we can go into what's going to be the topic of the podcast, which is around, I think, women and leadership and topics connected to that.
Absolutely. So, my name is Stacey, just as Phil introduced me. I have been in the healthcare arena, healthcare space in the capacity of sales, training, sales, business development for 28 years, which I still can't believe. I started my career with Johnson& and Johnson way back when. I was a sales rep for Ortho McNeil, and then had the pleasure to switch over and work for Eli Lilly, which allowed me to really specialize in the area of psychiatry, which was a lot of fun. Schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, and anxiety. I worked for a small biotech called Cephalon, then for a few years. And then in 2005, switched into medical education for clinicians, which was
Right.
actually feel very timely because that 2005 was right around the time when all the rules and regulations around marketing and education changed in the
Okay.
industry. And now I was with a smaller company called the Neuroscience Education Institute, still pursuing my passion in the psychiatric area. And then
Right.
switched over into to work for a company called Medscape, which is the leading continuing medical education provider for
Okay.
physicians worldwide in 2008. And I've been here 17 years, which,
15 years. Well done. That's a long time.
yeah.
You must love the company to be working for them for that period of time. So, but can I, before we move on, can I ask what drew you to this sort of area in the first instance? Was it psychiatry? Did you have a psychiatry background at all?
No, it's interesting. When you think back, I remember being, a little girl, and I always wanted to. My mom was a nurse. My dad
Okay.
was a dean of a school of pharmacy. My grandparents, and this is a fun fact, my grandparents owned two mortuaries, funeral home. So I grew up. I
Light and death.
actually, yeah. So it was all around life and death, and I loved healthcare. But I realized that I didn't want to go to school until I was 30. As much as I loved the potential of maybe going into healthcare, being a physician, I
Yes.
didn't want to be in school. So I opted for business, and I specialized in marketing,
Right.
and fell in love with sales during it was a professional selling class that I took, I think, my sophomore or junior year. And so that kind of led me down the sales route. And I've had a passion for being able to combine both the healthcare arena and the sales.
Yeah.
And that's kind of
Yeah.
how it all started.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Can I share some things with you that we haven't
Yeah.
discussed before, but has just come out of your introduction, which is quite interesting? So my wife was trained as a nurse, and then she became a health visitor. But it's very interesting when you talk about parental influences. Um, Neither of her parents were in the medical profession, but we discovered quite recently that a distant relative, and I'm talking about maybe the 1800s, so it's quite distant, was in
Quite.
fact one of those that we used to call them quacks. There used to be people that traveled from town to town with various potions and lotions, professing to be able to cure any particular ailment. So I just wonder whether her interest in the sort of healthcare profession maybe was carried through some sort of genetic condition. But not that I call her a quack, but she's moved away from that. But it is interesting. Okay, so that really kind of explains, your, I guess, interest in the profession and the whole topic of, I guess, psychology is really important for selling. So it's obviously something which is really important, but also, of course, it's very important in the medical profession as well. Can you just tell us a bit more about Medscape as well? We've got to know Medscape a little bit over the last year or so. through working with you and your colleagues on the coaching program, which has been amazing.
Yeah.
But tell us a bit more about it and how did it come about? And give us an idea of its,
Yeah.
maybe its structure.
Medscape and your listeners might have heard of WebMD. So Medscape and
Yeah.
WebMD are sister companies. And actually this year we're celebrating our 30th anniversary. We started out as a publishing company and
Right.
have been in the space for a very long time with the sole purpose of being a resource to healthcare providers to keep them current on the latest information that's coming out, whether it's diagnosis, guidelines, new medications, new devices. And as you know, Phil, medicine is exponentially growing.
Yeah.
I'm blown away by the number of new drug approvals, the number of treatments that for rare diseases that we never had anything.
Right.
So Medscape, it's an online platform that has current medical news. So physicians can come there to check the news of what's going
Right.
on in the medical space. There also is a tremendous amount of resources, whether it's calculators in terms of, I think we've all heard of the BMI
Yes.
calculation, but
Yeah, of course.
there are so many different formulas for everything for burn
Right.
victims to how much fluid you need in the ICU. So there's a lot of point of care resources, drug information, interaction checkers. And then the area that I am most partial to is education, because we know that um, physicians, nurses, pharmacists, they go to school.
Yeah.
They may do, they do an internship. They may do a residency. They may do a fellowship, which is advanced training in
Yeah.
cardiovascular surgery or orthopedics. And then we let them out to practice.
Yeah.
And the only ways that they stay up to date is attending big conferences, medical conferences,
Yeah.
maybe reading
Yeah.
journals, staying up to date, and through the internet as well. That was a
Yeah.
huge way to get information across. But Medscape creates continuing medical education, which is fair, balanced. It is the latest cutting edge information on phase
Yeah.
3 trials, phase 2 trials, experts sharing what they know with other experts. And so, when you look about why physicians would make a change, why would they start incorporating a new drug? Why would they know about new guidelines?
Yeah.
When, no matter what source you're looking at, continuing medical education or CME always rises to the top as being a credible source of
Yeah.
information, right up there with their colleagues, their peers, peer-reviewed
Right.
journals. So, you had asked me before about kind of how I got into healthcare. I think getting into healthcare, getting into education, your why is very clear.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
our why here at Medscape is, sure, it's great to get all that information out, but the why is that
Yeah.
it changes physicians' behavior. They're improving their knowledge on something new coming out may mean that when they see, Mr. Jones in their office the next week, that they're going to be able to offer the best possible care. And
Okay.
so that's a little bit about Medscape.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. And the customers are generally physicians and the medical profession itself. It's not so much the consumer. Is that right? The people on the
WebMD is more
receive.
focused. Yeah, WebMD is more focused on the consumer, where Medscape really is on the healthcare practitioner and that entire
Okay.
care team.
Yeah.
It's not to say that we don't provide education that could be passed on to the patient, because,
Yeah.
actually, when you survey healthcare professionals, that's one of their number one requests. They want credible resources to be able to give their patients.
Right.
I often joke with my mom. She's always like, "Well, I found it on the internet." And I said, "Mom, like, we got to make sure that it's credible. So if you go to WebMD, yeah, I know it's going to be credible, but you got to be careful because there's a lot of misinformation out there."
Yeah. Yeah. There is. And it's not just US based, is it? I mean, you cover the globe as
We
far as
do.
I,
So we
yeah.
actually reach, I think the latest numbers we had was like 13.2 million healthcare professionals, and that includes 6.5 million physicians. And it is
Right.
truly the largest online resource
Okay.
for physicians in the world.
Right. Okay. That's fantastic. Okay, so one of the topics that we're going to talk about is the Hear from Her podcast series that I know is a topic that you are absolutely sort of passionate about. And I wonder if you could spend some time just talking about what the purpose was of the podcast. Why did you do it? And I remember asking you before, Stacey, whose idea was it to come up with the podcast series? And I don't know whether you've sort of gone back into the
Yeah.
channels of information.
It actually was a discussion I was having with some colleagues, and we were talking about originally we wanted to do something that was internal at the company to highlight women leaders within our company to help inspire
Oh,
younger women in the company. And what was interesting is that conversation was happening along the same time where our partnership team, Medscape has a whole team that is solely focused on developing relationships with academic centers, with um, different groups, societies that are involved in patient care. And at the same time, our partnership team was looking to create a coalition. They call it the Innovations in Women's Health Coalition.
right.
Um, Phil, within medicine, this isn't like men versus women, but men and women are very different, and we see that in clinical trials. We see that in the way patients are managed, and we also wanted to be able to elevate women in medicine that had really made a difference. And so the Hear From Her podcast came out of those internal discussions of wanting to do something internally to be able to elevate the voices of our fellow Medscape and WebMD employees, but also to help make this a bigger initiative in terms of how can we get the word out and how can we really shine a light on the women who are in the healthcare space. So the Hear From Her podcast came about as a result of those discussions. It's been out for, I want to say, 3 years now.
Okay.
And what I love about how it's structured is every single one of the Hear From Her podcasts, maybe with the exception of a few, always has two panelists. One of them is someone who is on the business side in healthcare. So it could be a senior vice president or a chief medical officer or a CEO coming from a pharmaceutical or a device company. And we always pair them with a key opinion leader, a physician, a nurse practitioner, PA, nurse, pharmacist in the space that that company is operating in. And to hear the discussions that organically take place, it's been really inspiring, whether we're talking about vaccines, whether we're talking about women's health issues, whether we're talking about cardiology, neurology. Um, we're in good hands. And
Yeah.
and I've been very proud. It's an award-winning podcast, but I've been really proud to be involved in this because I think
Yeah.
it's gone way farther than we ever thought it would.
Yeah. No, I have listened to a number of the podcasts, and like you say, found them to be very inspiring. And it's triggered a number of questions, Stacey, which I hope you don't mind if I ask you
No, for sure.
the questions. And some of these questions may come across as being slightly naive, but if you take the healthcare industry as a sector, um, is it, what's the split between sort of women, male leaders within the healthcare profession? Is it predominantly men with some women, or is it roughly equal? Um, how many women are leaders within the healthcare profession?
Yeah.
Or you may not know the exact
Yeah,
stat.
I don't know the exact Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know the exact numbers, Phil, but I would say that it varies company to company. I would say it's probably predominantly men. I'm very fortunate
Oh,
to work for a company, Medscape and WebMD. We do have probably a 50-50 split, but that is
right.
definitely not the norm. I
Yeah,
do think also that when you're talking about the actual profession, and if you
yeah,
think about women going into medicine, it's a huge time commitment, and
yeah.
we
It
lose
is.
a lot
Yeah, yeah,
who opt to take a pause, have a
yeah, yeah.
family,
I know.
have
Yeah,
children. You also see some disparities when you get into the academic aspect of things with
yeah,
deans, leaders of medical schools. It
right.
definitely is more predominantly men. But
Yeah,
I think our goal was to really inspire folks that you can have it all. Well, if you do want to go higher up,
yes.
there is support there. And I think that listening to the podcast, I had the pleasure of interviewing two nurse practitioners last week one who's a senior vice president at Curology, which is a dermatology company, another one who's leading a women's health clinic in New York. And I was just in awe of their ability to juggle motherhood, their desire to get ahead in their careers. And I
Yeah.
think the one thing that really kind of was indicative of how they were able to do that was the fact that they were very clear on their why. And I think in healthcare, we
Yeah.
talked about this a little bit before. I think with healthcare, it's very easy to identify, why am I getting out of bed? Why am I stressing myself out? Why am I wanting to do that? And it is because you're having a direct impact on patient outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to ask you through all of the interviews that have happened, what your sort of observations have been of the key leadership traits that you think are particularly important for women in leadership roles.
Yeah. I think in terms of key traits, it is definitely having that strategic vision or that goal, that why of why you're
Mm.
wanting to do what you're doing. I think also having a support network, and it doesn't have to be just other women. It can be women, men, anybody, but having a support network that is going to help you achieve that goal.
Yeah,
And I do think being able to say, "Hey, I need some help on some things."
yeah,
Oftentimes, sometimes as women, we think we can handle it all, and that isn't always the case. And there's always
yes,
someone there that can lend a hand.
yeah. What struck me with listening to one of the interviews, I can't remember the name of the person now, but I think it was something that both people said on the podcast I listened to, was that they didn't come into the profession or to their roles with the idea of being a leader. They came into it because they wanted to be in the profession, and they happened to then find themselves in a leadership role. And it made me question whether that motivation, because you talk about purpose and you talk about, that being a key factor. And I'm a huge supporter of that. I would say that we're slightly similar in the way that we look at education here at Consalia. But I wonder whether that is a general attitude to employment is different, perhaps, to men who may go in wanting to go up the corporate ladder, and they're driven by that sort of ambition. So their purpose is position, perhaps within a company rather than profession itself. Um, and it just made me reflect a bit whether um, that was an observation perhaps that you had made in the leaders. They were natural leaders in the sense they evolved naturally because of their qualities of tenacity and perseverance, but they were at the intersect, I suppose, between something they found very purposeful and the natural qualities that they had, as a person. So,
I
don't
think
know what your thoughts are on.
it's a great observation. I wouldn't want to pigeonhole because I'm sure that
I
there are
know.
some men out there
Challenge.
purpose and who have passion, but I would say that the majority of individuals that I've encountered, especially on the Hear From Her podcast, just like you said, the goal was not to get ahead. The goal was to make a difference. And by accident or by design, it led to a leadership role that they excelled at.
Yeah.
And I think when I think of my own personal journey, did I ever set out to be a VP? No. That wasn't really the goal. I
Yeah.
wanted to be good at my job. I wanted to inspire individuals. I wanted to leave people in a better place than when I found them. And, if you gravitate towards what you actually love doing, and this, some of the younger folks that have the opportunity to mentor, I always say, be very keenly aware of what brings you joy and what you enjoy about your job. That's not going to say that you're going to find the perfect job that is going to not have all of the stuff that you're not 100% sure
Yeah.
of. But if you can position yourself and if you are aware of what brings you joy and what you really enjoy doing, it's amazing how the doors just open up. I would have never gotten into training had I not, had another opportunity not come into play. I would have never gotten into education had something not happened with the kind of rules and regulations with regard to pharmaceutical sales.
Yeah.
Um, and when I look back, everything, Phil, one thing you may or may not know about me, I love jigsaw puzzles. I even have this.
Okay.
For
No,
those of you
yeah,
who are
that's new.
listening, I wear a puzzle piece necklace. Yes, I love autism. I have a friend who has an autistic son. However, a puzzle piece, if you've ever worked a puzzle, every single piece has a place. And I look back on my life and every single thing that has happened to me has a place. And I think you
Right.
find this sense of comfort when you might be in uncharted waters to say, well,
Yes.
this training thing I'm not too sure about. Every piece has a place. And when I
Yeah.
look back on my life, it has all come perfectly together.
And
It's not done yet, Phil, but yes, I'm on my way.
you're on your way. So yes, you don't quite know what the final picture is going to look like, or do you have an idea? You can see that there's a house over here or a mountain range over there on the puzzle.
Well, I will tell you, I see things lining up, which is a
Okay.
really neat thing to see. Yep.
Yeah. But how many how many how many people have the privilege of being in that position, would you say, of knowing, what gives them joy, like you say, or what gives them purpose? It's a real privilege, I think, to be in the situation that you're in. A lot of people go through a lot of their life trying to work out what is it, you know, sometimes even who are they? Yeah. What is it that really drives them? What is it that gives them joy? And they're not happy in what they do.
Yeah.
Bit
I
profound, isn't
think,
it? Isn't that
and
a
it's
profound comment?
interesting. Yeah. So Phil, as you know, I'm working on my coaching certification through
Yeah.
Consalia, absolutely loving the journey.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that has struck me, power of silence, the power of space and time to just sit with your thoughts. And I
Mm.
think when you do that, it helps you identify what you really enjoy. When you give yourself the time to think about it. We at work in such a busy society. I
Mm.
mean, we are held captive by our to-do lists. We go, 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 get up, go through the day, get home, go to bed, get back up, go through it again the next day. I think what has been most helpful for me in identifying and thinking about what I really enjoy is just giving myself the time and the space and doing it with intention. And, oftentimes when I say that to someone who's at the beginning of their career, take a pause. Be aware of what you like. Be aware. And if you don't know what you like, I'm sure you're very clear on what you don't like. Sometimes it's easier for us to identify what we're not crazy about. But take the time. Take the time to do that. Don't get caught up in the rat race.
Mhm.
And that is going to help. I think the giving yourself silence, giving yourself space and time to think through things
Yeah.
is the best gift you can give.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting on the some of the programs we run on the master's level, and to some extent, I'm sure you covered it on the coaching, is that we ask people to reflect a little on what their sort of core values are, because so much of how they look at life is influenced by what those values might be. But it's always very surprising how few people have actually thought about it in depth, to really have reflected on it. And quite often you find that when we start to talk about values, ask people the first time round, you come up with some fairly sort of flippant, not flippant, but they talk about family and integrity and so on. But actually starting to delve deeper into those maybe pivotal events that have helped shape you as a person, that does take deep reflective thought. And it's most people, I would say, have not given themselves the space, or perhaps they haven't had the structured conversations through coaching, perhaps, Stacey, for them to really get in touch with what those thoughts and feelings are. yeah, I remember on a module that I was at Middlesex University when I was doing my doctorate. Yeah, one of the tutors asked me that same question. So, Philip, do you mind telling me what your values were? And I came out with some glib comments, and she looked at me as if she was saying, "You're talking out of bullshit, Phil." She didn't say those words. She was far more diplomatic, but that's how it felt. But actually, it had a huge impact because I completely agree with you that it's sort of getting in touch with what's important and what shaped you as an individual can help better understand the reality of the situation you're in. Do you think that process is particularly important for women in leadership roles, or do you think it's more general than that?
That's a great question. I would say that it's probably more general. I think
Yeah.
it is the key to success for whether you're male or female. Um, being really clear with who you are. And I don't think that it is stagnant. I think it evolves as you do as a person.
Yeah.
One thing that I love to do, and I don't do it every year, Phil, but I try to pick a
Yeah.
word that is going to kind of set the tone for my year. And I usually it's in December, I start thinking about it and reflecting on what do I want more of in my life?
Mm.
It really helps me kind of hone in on what does bring me joy. And so my word this year is shine. And I picked the
Okay.
word shine um because well, a couple of different reasons. One is I always want to be a bright spot in someone's day. I want to make sure that I'm meeting them with warmth from
Mm.
shining of a light. I wanna
Yeah.
make sure I'm leaving them in a better place. And so, when you pick a word for the year, it really helps you kinda set the tone, and it's almost like a touchstone that you go back to. Say you're, involved in a project or you're having a tough day, it's kind of my reflection point to go back and go, "Hey, man, this shine was the word. Let's make sure that we are, um,
Wow.
illuminating this situation." Now, I will say I don't pick one every year. Last year, didn't feel it. Didn't pick a word,
Okay.
but I've had words like evolve, I've had, courage, but I
Wow.
would encourage the listeners to, if you are wanting to kind of get more in touch with yourself, take that time and,
Yeah.
hello, in the invent, who helped me pick my word this year? AI, Gemini. I started just randomly typing things in about
I,
what I wanted next year to look like, and it gave me a bunch of different words to
yeah.
at least think through. So, I think that's one way to help you kind of get in touch with the deeper meaning of your life and how you want to shape things, for the following year.
That's amazing. Um, you sound quite systematic and organized in the way you think things through. Is that is that a reasonable reflection, Stacey? Or I mean,
Yes, I would say I don't know if you're familiar with DISC, but I would say
yeah,
I am not too much my C, which is conscientious and details, I'm actually pretty low. I like things more big picture.
right.
I
More
think,
framework in
more
detail.
yeah, less detail, more kind of big picture, more,
Yeah,
conceptual. But I will say that I think I'm very fortunate in the fact that, I'm very in touch with my own emotions, and I think that that plays
right.
into making me the leader that I am. So
Yeah.
whether it's a systematic approach to my I wouldn't say systematic, I would say I'm much more empathetic and much more just aware. I think it's a self-awareness.
Oh yes, no,
Um,
I get that. But I also see you as like having there are certain principles that you think are important and you carry them through, maybe not every year.
yeah,
But yeah, that's what I really meant by systematic.
yeah.
That you have a structure to the way you like to go about things. Have you heard of the work of Cooper Ryder and appreciative inquiry? Have you come across that as a? Do you know? I think you would love David Cooper Ryder, and um, and David introduced a different way of looking at problem solving, and it's called appreciative inquiry because it's based on appreciating the best of what is good Yeah. And then you go through different stages as a sort of a loop process. So you look at what is best. Then you look at how could you make best better?
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's best done in a collaborative environment. So instead of looking at a problem, where you tend to look at rather negative things, you take a situation, you say, well, what is the, what does best look like in this given situation? And then you move round to, well, if we were going to make best better, what would that look like? Yeah. So how can we take, for example, take leadership and women in
Yeah.
leadership. You say, well, who are great exemplars of the best in women's leadership? And then you say, well, how can we take the best to make it better? Yeah. What sort of things would better look like? And then you move more into an execution phase, which is how do we then take those principles of learning and sort of create an action plan from it? Then how do we review it? And then do we take the learnings and take the best of the learnings and make it better? So it's the opposite to problem solving, which tends to focus on things that go wrong. It's focusing on things that go well. But sorry, I've
I
gone on.
love that. No,
I
I
just
love that. And
thank you for that.
you can count on
I
me to
just know I think it
check
would
out
choose.
that.
I think you'd enjoy it. I love it because it's very energizing. It's a very energizing way to look at developing new ideas, and it's very innovative because of the energy that's kind of created from the
Well, and also
process.
the focus on the positive, because I
And
do
the
think,
exactly.
yeah, focus on the positive, and it is so important. And I am someone who I'm a consummate optimist. I
Yeah,
always see the glasses. Yeah, I'm always like the glass is half full.
yes,
And I always would get pushback. I own it now. This is who I am. I'm a very positive
yeah,
person. Um, but people always say, Stacey, how you're always in such a great mood. Wow,
yeah,
it's a choice. We all have the choice. I wake up and be a sourpuss? Absolutely. But I think life is too short. Life is too short, and there's so much out there for us to be grateful for. So
yeah.
much.
So I suppose there's a couple of questions sort of looking at the future because, we talked a little bit about the podcast and, you know, what amazing things have been achieved through hearing uh, women leaders talk about their experiences and so on. Where do you see the future of the podcast going?
It's a great question. I don't think we thought it would go on as long as it has, but we continue to have demand, and we actually have listeners in 96 different countries.
That's amazing.
Which absolutely, yeah, I know that we're having an impact all over the world
Yeah,
with sharing their
yeah,
stories. There will be a season 4. I just recorded an episode last week. I think we're going to continue to explore the boundaries. I think when you think of women's health, most everyone thinks of reproductive health.
yeah,
And there is so much more to women.
yeah.
Actually, women have a higher prevalence of Alzheimer's disease. They have higher prevalence of cardiovascular disease. And so there's a
Right,
lot of different things that we can explore
right.
throughout to inspire new women leaders. So I think the future is bright for that podcast. I am excited to continue to be involved in it. I
Yeah,
think for myself, if you want me to talk about kind of
yeah,
where I see myself going, I wouldn't say it's been a recent kind of passion of mine, but this whole idea of executive presence and charisma in leadership
right.
has been something that I have kind of immersed myself in more and have had the opportunity to do more talking and share kind of my experience with executive presence with some of the younger up and coming
Yeah,
generations, as well as those who've been around for a while at Medscape. So for me, I want to continue the work in that area. I also, as I have gotten older, I turned the big
yeah.
50 this year. Woo! Very
You are
exciting.
so young, Stacey.
I'm such a young whippersnapper, but actually, I would say for any of you who are approaching 50, it's best years of your life. Like
Yes,
honestly,
yeah,
30s, 40s, yeah. I mean, 40s were fun, but 50s is really here. Uh, I find it my responsibility now that I am in a leadership position,
Right.
um, to make sure that I am, the phrase we use on the podcast is lifting as we rise. We need to lift up other folks as we're rising.
Yeah.
And you do that. Phil, I don't know if you have heard or if you come across the word sponsorship. I know coaching is in your
Yeah.
blood,
Yeah. Yeah.
sponsorship,
Of course. Yeah.
mentorship.
Yeah.
And there's a difference. As you are rising up in the ranks, it is our responsibility to sponsor, which means you are recommending, you are talking about individuals when they are not in the room. Whether you're a man
Yes.
or a woman, you
Yeah.
are you're volunteering up folks that you think would be really good at the job by
Yeah.
sponsoring them. And that's how we bring people along. Once you've sponsored them, then that's when mentorship and coaching kick in, that
Yeah.
you're going to want them to be successful in that.
Right.
So as I have evolved as a leader in my own right, that is my focus now. My focus really is on helping bring out the best
Yeah.
in the next generation of sales folks and the next generation of
Yeah.
leaders, be it men or women.
And it's very inspiring actually listening to you talk, Stacey. Yeah. I think the younger people inside Medscape are very lucky to have someone like you, in this kind of role of development and enablement. Yeah. Wise words.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wise words indeed. I know that on your podcast, you often finish the podcast with, are there any sort of key takeaways? And perhaps you've actually alluded to that as well in what you've just said. But if you were to kind of reflect a bit on, what would be the key takeaways for women in a leadership role, what would they be? I know you've spoken about this already, perhaps, but what would be the key messages you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah. The key messages, and Phil, it's interesting because I hadn't really thought about it, and this conversation's gone a lot of different directions than what I thought, which has been great.
I hope
But
you've
I would
enjoyed it.
say, yeah, no, but I would say that for leaders out there, whether you're in sales or not, whether you're in healthcare or not, I think the best thing that you can do is really find your why, your North Star of why you're doing what you're doing and become, very aware of what you enjoy and follow
Yeah.
that path. I think that we all have an opportunity to help shape other individuals as well. And I take it as a responsibility. I think um, someone saw something in me way back
Yeah. Yeah.
25 years ago. And,
Yeah.
I think we can all look back on the leaders that shaped us. But as you start evolving in your career and whether, like I said, male, female, we have the obligation to give back. And so I would encourage you two things. One would be to get to know yourself better, meaning really think about what brings you joy, what you get excited about, and try and put as much of that in your day to day as you possibly can. And then the second thing is take the opportunity to impart everything that you've learned along your journey to someone else because it makes a difference. And that is how all of us are going to improve as leaders by
Yeah.
sharing, by keeping a positive attitude and always looking to give back. I think that
Yeah.
those are my parting words.
Yes. Can I ask one final question, Stacey, which is about charisma and presence? It's part of your future direction. And perhaps I should have asked this question before I asked you for your final comments. But is it possible to develop people's charisma, do you believe? Or do you think it's latent?
100%, 100%.
100%?
No, I think in terms of executive presence or charisma or the wow factor, there are very simple things that one can do. And the two key variables, Phil, that help shape you as how people perceive you are your warmth and your
Right.
competence. You could simplify it to your friendliness and your
Okay.
smarts. But the two
Okay.
questions that folks need to answer is, can I trust you?
Yeah.
Can I follow you? And warmth are things like smiling, like making eye contact, like
Yeah.
nodding when someone's talking, having an open presence.
Yeah.
When you think about the competence or your intelligence, it's about becoming an expert in your space, mastering all of the
Yeah.
information that you possibly could. It's about speaking up. It's about offering up an opinion when you might
Yeah.
be shy and not want to. I always tell people silence speaks words of misunderstanding. And if you're quiet, I don't know what you know.
Yeah.
So, increasing your competence by not only the physical of standing tall and holding your head high, but also of speaking up and showing what you know and what your skill set is and having a positive
Yes.
attitude. So absolutely you can influence how people view you
Yeah.
in the way that you act, in the way that you communicate, and the way that you look.
Okay.
It's
That's
skills.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a lovely way to finish the podcast, Stacey. Thank you so much for your time for joining
Yeah.
us.
Well, and thank you, Phil, for your thoughtful questions. And I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you today.
Oh, that's great. Me too.